Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron Channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, we're going to talk about the art of attacking a set. All right, guys, I'm joined by Landon from Basement Bodybuilding. It's kind of weird, Landon, having you in your basement because for me, it started in my basement, like a basement just like yours. One day, about 12, I was driving to work one day, and I was listening to like ESPN Sports Radio, and one of the announcers said, "Hey, there's this thing called YouTube." So I went over there and made a video out of my basement in YouTube, and it's kind of weird seeing you in your basement now. You kind of remind me of like a younger me. So anyway, I appreciate you joining me. Before we get started, can you let everybody know where they can find you on the YouTubes and social media?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, YouTube is just basement bodybuilding. Instagram is also basement bodybuilding. Not too active on there. 99% of stuff's on YouTube, so that's where it's at.
So I want to dive into the art of attacking a set because we were talking a little bit before we got on about more minimalism, the impact of strength training on muscle building, how strength training almost killed muscle building in a sense. And I want to get some, just want to lead in with some of your general thoughts when you are approaching a set. Is there any specific focus or way that you try to attack the set other than just trying to look at pure numbers and pure progression of numbers?
Yeah, that's a good question. In general, I think what you have to do is tailor the weight that you're using, the rep range that you're working with, and the volume you're doing to what needs to be done for that muscle group in that session or throughout the week. So when I'm doing a set, the weight is what it needs to be. So if I have to hit somewhere between 8 and 12 reps for 2 to 5 sets on a Smith machine press, then the weight is just whatever fits that mold for me to use the technique that I want to. Once I'm in the set, the weight doesn't matter. And I think for myself, that mindset works really well. There's some people that maybe do benefit a little bit more from chasing numbers, but in my own personal opinion, I think it's best to not have to rely on that to have an effective set. The biggest thing for me is once the numbers and the volume and the rep range is selected, it's about training a hard set and chasing hard sets with what's in front of me. And the biggest thing there is technique and fighting against instincts in that lift if I have to. So that means making sure I go through a full range of motion, get a nice stretch, the best that I can practically get on that lift, and taking it as close to failure as I need to. And the numbers, once you have the hard sets down, the numbers generally will follow. And I think if the numbers aren't following, like your reps aren't increasing over time and you're not growing, it's probably an indicator that either your sets aren't hard or maybe there's something else that's off in your program and you can kind of reverse engineer from there and do a deep dive into it.
I think this is a point that confuses a lot of people because when I started, I'm a numbers guy. I'm not going to lie. I like to see where I was last time. And part of my gauge for hard work is, am I moving past where I was last time? If not, I'm probably not working hard enough. But my focus was always on getting as much out of a set as I could. And then from that, the strength numbers kind of progressed. And I think this is a point of confusion for a lot of people. There's a difference between chasing strength, just chasing numbers at the expense of set quality, and chasing hard work and set quality, and the numbers kind of happen from there.
Yeah, I think a common issue is maybe biting off a little bit more than you can chew in terms of weight used. Ultimately, what's going to drive that progression is the hard sets. There's no way around. There's really no way around that. You have to obviously put in the hard work. And I like to have a almost like a not a short term, but not quite a long term, almost like a midterm mindset when I'm lifting. Is I want to in a couple weeks I want to have a couple more reps, or maybe next week I want to have a couple more reps. But in this short term right now, it has to be a hard set. The accumulation of those hard sets does start to drive progression, especially once you have a good program and you understand programming, you know how to train hard. That's really all you can do. And then the performance will come, and that's usually a reflection that you're training hard and building muscle.
One of the issues with talk, I'll say this: one of the things I find interesting about the combination or about the conversation, excuse me, about hard work is we had guys like Greg Doucette, talking about work harder than last time. And when I talk about hard work, and I'm curious if you get this as well, sometimes it's a foreign concept. I think because muscle building has turned into some kind of more of a structure focus, more of an exercise structure, more of a set and rep scheme. And we've lost a little bit of the art. And a big part of making a set hard is actually very nuanced when you're in a set. It's much more art than it is science. Do you feel that way when you're in a set? Like you can feel a hard set rather than just feel some numbers.
It's an unquantifiable aspect of training and programming, and that's what gets kind of lost in my opinion. That's a really good point you made. I completely agree with you there, and I think what separates the people that do have success is it's that hard work that you can't measure it. And I think as guys and as lifters, like it's so easy to get caught up in the numbers because they surround us and our brains think in a very logical way like that. But there's much more to it, and when you turn a blind eye to it, I think that's when your progression starts to slow down a little bit, when you think you can out program hard sets. And that's one thing's easy to understand, which is the programming. And I'm not saying programming's easy, because it is difficult and it takes years to understand, but it's a quantifiable thing that you can tangibly learn and understand and teach. With hard sets, it's almost something that you kind of have to teach yourself by experience and watching maybe some other people lift that are more successful. And it's one of those things that you can't quite measure. It's almost like the what do they call it? Like the sixth sense or something like that.
Yeah, it's like you can on paper you could write out everything you want to find in a a partner, right? But then if you still have to make it work. Having wants and needs on paper is a lot different than actually making it work in the real world. I want to ask you about passion, because a lot of times things have become, we've watched things over the last 10, 12 years become very mechanical. And you talk about people trying to outprogram hard work. Passion is such an integral part of this. And I see a lot of guys that I almost feel like they're more passionate about the programming, about the structure, about the numbers, but then they are having a hard time carrying that over to their actual workouts. When it comes to hard sets, how much for you personally does passion play a role in every set? Like how bad you want it, how hard you just want to attack.
I mean, I think it's the most important part. The way that I see it, and the point that I make is, I made a video recently. I can't remember what the title was, but I think, oh, you know what? It was called Earn Your Programming. And what I mean by that is, you want to learn how to work hard first, and you want to be that person that you can't control, and just you go out and you're going to overtrain. And once you can become that person, then programming matters, because you have to hold yourself back a little bit. And that's where programming comes into play, where you have certain markers of maybe where your volume should stop, and maybe you start to measure your progress in the gym to make sure you're not training too hard or overtraining, and you have a little bit more of a methodical approach to it. But you have the foundation of hard work and passion and drive, and those are the people that need the proper programming. I think if you don't have that passion built up kind of intrinsically yet, programming can certainly help you, and it's better than a good program is going to be better than a bad program. But the program isn't going to fulfill that kind of innate desire that you need to build up yourself. And I think setting up your environment and your mental health in a way that allows you to build that passion and really get pumped up for the gym and just go all in and not really hold back. Once you build that, the program kind of helps tame that and keeps you, I guess, in check, and it helps you structure that passion in a sense. And that's what needs to be focused on, that you can't quite quantify or tangibly grasp.
Now, when we talk about hard work, I always like to lay down caveats that we have to be sensible with how we train. We can't be reckless. We can't encourage injuries. Um, what I do is very focused. It's hard, but it's focused in the sense that I never risk an injury, and sometimes when you mention hard work and passion, it can almost drive people to go to the gym and do ridiculous things that can put themselves in harm's way. I want you to talk about that a little bit. How do you temper passion and hard work and keep it in the zone of sustainability so you don't get injured?
It's through the program. That's the second piece in my opinion. Once you have all that passion, because I did that. I've gone through those phases where I just went all out, and I don't think I ever overtrained to the point where I did it negatively impacted myself, but I was probably getting into junk volume territory. And then to tame that, it's through the program. So I watch my volume a little bit closer. I watch my rep ranges a lot closer, and I watch my exercise selection. I pay attention for any nagging injuries, which I've been lucky to avoid my entire lifting career. Obviously, I've had little aches and pains here and there, but nothing even close to major. And it's really the program that takes that passion that keeps kind of going out, and that it holds it back to the spot where it needs to be, and it kind of gives you that happy medium. So it's a mix of programming variables. I'd say exercise selection is a big one for me, being able to do a lot of isolation lifts, do a lot of machines. These are super stimulative lifts that you can go all out on and really leave it all on the table with very little fatigue and very low risk of injury. And that's where I do think that isolation lifts are underrated. Like when people tell you that you don't have to do curls, or people tell you you don't have to do any isolation lifts, or that's only the 10% cherry on the top. I think you're missing out on a lift that can not only give you a good bang for your buck, but something that can actually teach you how to work hard without any downsides. Like if you tell a beginner to go all out on sumo deadlifts, you can probably expect a lower back injury. But if you tell a beginner to go all out and challenge themselves on tricep pushdowns, I mean, I think that's going to teach them a decent amount.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I tend to personally. I mean, I do the barbell exercise. I love the barbell exercises, but that's a personal choice, right?
Yeah.
And just what I like to do. But I like dumbbell exercises more than barbells because I find I can focus more. I can do more volume. I can get more out of a dumbbell bench session than I can. It's a small degree, but I'm not talking, a wide gulf here, but when I do dumbbell bench, I feel like it's safer, easier, and I can get more out of it. And to be quite honest, when I do a bench press session, the time it takes to do all the warm up sets is extremely tedious, and I'm constantly second guessing every day whether I want to go through that process.
Yeah. I'm similar experience with squats and deadlifts, where you hear a lot of people talk about just do the big three if you're trying to be a little bit more minimalist. And in my mind, I'm like, I get where they're coming from, but I think if time's a constraint, my squat and deadlift sessions, those would take around an hour back when I was kind of at my peak strength power building. And most of my volume would probably come in that time or a little bit less. And that's not to demonize barbell lifts by any means, because I think there's certain downsides to some of them, but why demonize an entire group of lifts? I do think that supersetting and giant setting lifts that allow you to get more volume is pretty helpful too.
Now I want to talk about when you actually are watching somebody set. Uh, People that are watching will be like, "How do I know if I'm training hard? What are some things that I should look for?" And I'm going to mention something that I hate to say bothers me, but it's kind of like, I wouldn't say bother me, but when I see it, I want to I want to jump in behind the scenes and fix it. And that is when you can kind of tell when people are pushing numbers or rushing numbers because there's no control on the negative. And there's a fine line between controlling the negative and trying to do time under tension stuff, right? There's a fine line, there's a difference. But like, let's say when I'm doing a lat pull down or a seated cable row, I will pull it in on the seated cable row. I have a very strong focus on how I'm pulling. And then as I'm pulling it back, I'll let my shoulders roll forward a little bit, get a little bit of a lat stretch. There's a control, not a slow. We're not doing like a 3 second negative, but there's a control. There's a rhythm and a pattern in the set, and I progress in that lane. And when you watch a lot of training on YouTube or on Instagram or on social media, it's like pull, it's like this stuff. There's no, like, all the little nuance things, all the little pieces and parts of that set are kind of lagging behind. That's one thing that when I look at a set, I want to dive in and fix. Are there any things, when you're looking at a set and considering hard work that you think are necessities or things you want to dive in and fix for someone?
Yeah, I would say the biggest things, range of motion and control, like you said. It doesn't mean, yeah, 3 second negative on a seated cable row. I mean, at that point it might even be counterproductive. But I think having the control and focusing on the target muscle. I'm not saying to focus on mind muscle connection at the expense of other things, but when you're doing a lift, what's the intent of that lift? Is it a stretched, focused lift? Do you want to, like a seated cable row, for example? That's great for stretching your kind of upper back, even parts of the lats. Make sure you're getting that stretch. Use a weight, rep range, and proximity to failure that's appropriate for you to get that stretch and get a lot out of that set. When I see people rushing the negative just to get more reps, that's when it becomes an issue. So take it back to something like the rep goal system. You'll see people that are like, oh, well, I was only a few reps away from hitting the rep goal, so I rushed the negative or cut range motion because the hitting more reps is just going to be magically more stimulative. Well, at that point, no, because you're sacrificing the quality of the reps. So yeah,
Right.
maybe on paper in our logical numbers program that it looks good and it gives you that little satisfaction that you want to get out of it. But at the same time, you're missing the stretch. You're missing the controlling of the negative. Maybe the proximity to failure is there, but that doesn't mean much if your technique isn't in check.
So before we go, I want to touch on one more point, and this is something we talked about before, and I think it's an important point because I've been doing this forever, and I've seen trends come and go, and new ideas tend to come along, and they don't stay in the gray area. They usually swing way to the one side, and everybody's doing everything. And we hit a period where bodybuilding, muscle building nearly got destroyed. And that sounds dramatic, but in a lot of ways, when we moved to minimalism, the cult of barbell is a phrase I like to use, where just use barbells and just use 5x5s and just use minimal programs. I hate to say it almost destroyed muscle building, but it destroyed a lot of results. It took the dreams and goals. It wasted a lot of time, and I've pushed back on this a lot to the point where it got well. It was just fun being the whipping boy and being demonized, but that realm. Where we kind of think we're working hard because we have the 5x5s and the barbells and everything. Uh, it, it it nearly destroyed muscle building. What are the good things about that? And what are the things that it took away from muscle building and hard work that are needed?
Good question. And it's an experience that I went through. That's kind of when I started lifting, was when all that stuff started to take over, maybe around 2016 or so. The the benefits to it, I think it brought it brought a bit too much of a focus on progressive overload, but I think some progression in whether the progression's shitty, it doesn't matter as much as no progression. So I think it might have helped in that sense, but I think it's going to lead you to a dead end pretty quickly. I think it it oversimplified training too much, but having it a little bit more simple is probably more digestible for some people to learn. So I think overall, maybe an oversimplification is better than the we still see these crazy Instagram workouts. It's the same thing as the old school magazines where it's 12 sets of barbell curls for 25 reps each or something ridiculous like that. You still see those around sometimes, but I'd say overall, yeah, probably, yeah, a couple positives there. A little bit tough for me to see anything because I only had a bad experience with it, really. But I think overall, on the downsides, I mean, it was just a nihilistic viewpoint towards bodybuilding, and I think at when it comes to a programming sense, yeah, there's some issues with it. But when you have something that's almost an art form like bodybuilding is, and you start to view it as something where nothing matters, it doesn't matter, just do this, just get stronger, just do a 5 by 5. It doesn't matter, don't do your curls. You're almost missing out on that kind of excitement and passion, and it almost takes it away from you because what you enjoy to do and learn about is just it's being stripped away and it's just turned into this dumbed down thing that you everything that you think can help is just completely useless. And that's a bigger conversation to get into, but that's the surface level way that I see it in terms of the mindset and the programming approach.
I know those are watching are like wondering why I bring this up, but as someone that coaches for a living, a huge part of my focus is trying to pull people, a lot of people from that world or a lot of the pillars that were part of that world and bring them back over just to do dumbbells, just to do machines, just to even do higher reps above six. You know, there's a big part of what I do, and I'm sure you run into this a lot of trying to pull people back to not an extreme opposite of that, but more of a reasonable focus that's more beneficial for hypertrophy.
Definitely. There's a reason why my best gains came in that time when I was not dogmatic with the exercise selection that I used, where I was able to use a little bit of everything, which is pretty similar to what I do now, versus when I started to just be a little bit more minimalist with my training, and that was kind of preached as the better way to go about it. I think there's a reason why my gains stalled when I oversimplified my methods, and that's an issue, and that can kill your mindset. That can hurt it pretty good.
All right, man. I appreciate you appreciate you joining me, and I love to have you on anytime you want to come back. I don't want to keep you too long, so we'll get going. But remind everybody again where they can find you on the YouTubes.
Thanks for having me on. Basement bodybuilding on YouTube.
All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.